Let's talk about the archer's hook on the string and arrow, and lay out the sound principles that make for a good hook. The hook has two purposes. One is to allow the archer to pull the string back against the draw weight of the bow, and the second, more important, is to allow for an easy, smooth, and consistent release. Let's look at how best to accomplish these 2 points, and let's start by looking at the inside of the hand where the fingers actually engage the string. Looking at the hand, we see that the alignment of the fingers and the joints dictates that the middle finger should be the dominant finger. I suggest that the middle finger carry about 50% of the load, the index finger about 30%, and the ring finger about 20%. Other people vary, but generally suggest distributions in the ranges shown to the left, but they never defend their numbers. Let's talk about why I know the middle finger should be so high and the index finger should be kept down at about 30%. Another thing I want to discuss here is how deep the hook should be, meaning how far under the fingers should the string be held. While some suggest a deeper grip, fully inside the fingertips and the outer joint, and others even go so far as to want it up close to the second joint, I'm adamant on this point. The string should be held as far out on the fingertips as is possible. It makes the release much more slippery and smooth. For heavier drawweight bows, the string may need to be brought further in to hold it more securely, but still keep it out as far as possible. Now let's talk about the distribution on those fingers. You can see here that the middle finger is well positioned to handle the most load. The index finger is strong, however it has a problem. While it can easily handle the load, it can also get caught in that wedge between the string and the arrow. This is why you don't want the index finger wrapped too deeply around the string, and thus you can't put too much weight on it. If it gets snagged in that wedge, it will interfere with the release. Do not take it in too deeply, as is shown in the picture on the right. You can see here how the outer phalange of the index finger is fully lodged in the wedge of the string and the arrow, and this could seriously hinder the release. The ring finger, below the middle finger, is not so much used to draw the string back. Its primary purpose is to open the string up to give clearance to the middle finger. If the ring finger were not there, the middle finger would be just as susceptible to the wedging as the index finger is. With the ring finger pulling down on the string, the middle finger has a much easier release because the wedge is taken out. This is why the middle finger can be relied upon so heavily. Thus, with the fingers in this position on the string, the archer will have the easiest and smoothest release possible. So let's look at the archer now and see how this hook actually looks from outside the hand, from what the coach can actually see. This archer has a good hook. You can see even from the back of the hand how his fingers are set to hold the string as we just discussed. The key features to this hand position that allow this are: the hand is in line with the forearm, the hand is flat and straight, the plane of the hand is parallel to the plane of the string and bow, the fingers are in line with the hand and they're pulled straight by the load of the string. The fingers engage the string as we described earlier, bent at the fingertips to hold the load. Note here that the index and middle fingers are parallel and evenly spaced, and arrows width apart. Here are some other archers with good solid hooks. There's some room for variation in these points depending upon differences in the individual hand. These are the basic principles for the hand position for a proper hook. Now, let's look at each of these principles in detail. First, the hand is straight in line with the arm. This stems from the general alignment discussion because anything out of alignment must have adverse lateral stresses, and we want to avoid all adverse stresses at this critical point. Since the primary pulling finger is the middle finger and the forearm is pulled back by the elbow, there should be a straight line from the elbow down through the wrist to the middle finger. The bones are all set up to make this the most effective alignment and to make the middle finger the dominant drawing finger. And a coach should be aware of how this alignment looks for his archers from all angles. Now it is very important that the hand be held vertically, parallel to the plane of the string and the bow. Notice how in all these pictures the archer on the left has a properly set vertical hand, and the archer on the right has the hand tilted with the top index finger leaning in. Let's look closely at how this affects the fingers. Notice the archer on the left with the correct vertical hand, and how his fingers are all properly set on the string, while the archer on the right has let his hand roll out a little. See how this makes his index finger grab more deeply onto the string. Here, we see a correct vertical hand from both sides. Notice how all fingers are properly set. Here, we see an archer with a tilted hand. Notice how deeply his index finger is set on the string. And in this extreme, but not uncommon case, the ring finger is simply touching the string and not really contributing to the hook at all. Even without tilting the hand, some archers simply grab too deeply with the index finger. This flaw gives a clear diagonal to the fronts of the fingers, as shown here. When combined with a slight twist, as in this archer, the index finger actually gets behind the arrow knock, and it becomes extremely difficult to make a smooth release. Also with this archer, notice the ring finger and how it contributes nothing to the hook. Many archers with light draw-weight bows keep the ring finger unengaged. You can see by the shallow grip of the archer on the right that she clearly has a lighter draw-weight bow than the archer on the left. Unfortunately, once a technique becomes ingrained, the archer often continues with it, even when the draw weight increases, as in the case of this archer. The final point is that the index and the middle fingers should be parallel and evenly spaced, about an arrow's width apart. Here are some examples of archers with these fingers set in this proper position. This is a very important factor of the hook. See how all these archers accomplish this very nicely. Many archers do not accomplish this, however, sometimes through lack of effort, and sometimes because the finger spacer on the tab is too thick to allow it. Now let's look how this can go wrong. Many archers fail in this area, particularly with the index finger, which is often bent too deeply. Given that the index finger is shorter than the middle finger to start with, this bend makes it even shorter, and is a clear indication that the index finger is carrying too much of the load. Notice these archers who all keep the index finger hooked rather than straight. This hooked index finger prevents the archer from keeping the index and middle fingers evenly spaced and parallel, and sets the archer up for an even more complex problem, pinching the fingertips behind the arrow. Notice on this archer how her thick finger spacer forces her index and middle fingers too far apart, and then when they come back together, they pinch behind the arrow knock. When the index finger gets behind the knock, it gives opportunity for a huge variability that can drastically affect the release. With this archer, we see the same thing, as the thick finger spacer and the slightly rolled out hand both contribute to the problem. Notice also how the ring finger is simply touching the string and not contributing to the hook at all. This archer has the same problem as the others, with the fingertips getting behind the arrow knock. Consider how this can affect the release, as the fingers do not simply need to let the string loose, but they must also move around the arrow knock. So to summarize, the archer should hold the string as far out on the fingers as possible. The load balance on the fingers should be about 50% on the middle finger, 30% on the index finger, and 20% on the ring finger. Taking extra note not to dig the index finger too deeply around the string and getting it lodged in that wedge. The hand should be straight in line with the forearm, with a line drawn from the elbow through the wrist to the middle finger. The back of the hand should be flat and vertical. The fingers should be held together and pulled straight under the load of the bow. And the index and middle fingers should be evenly spaced and arrows width apart. If you study the best archers in the world, you'll see that they vary considerably in their technique. However, they all build upon the foundation of these sound principles, because they will set the archer's hand up for the best and smoothest release possible.